Have you ever wondered what happened to those magnificent ancient civilizations that just seemed to vanish? Think of the Maya or the inhabitants of Easter Island. They built incredible cities, developed complex societies, and then, poof, they were gone. We often look at climate change or invasion as the culprits, but what if the answer lies deeper, inside the human mind itself? Let's try a thought experiment. Imagine an entire society as a single giant brain. Each person is a neuron, and the connections between them, trade, communication, relationships, are the synapses. For this social brain to thrive, information needs to flow freely, just like neural signals. New ideas are like sparks of electricity, creating new pathways and making the network stronger and more adaptable. This is how civilizations innovate, solve problems, and grow. But what happens when this flow gets blocked? This is where psychology and philosophy come in. Imagine a society that becomes too rigid, too resistant to change. Maybe its beliefs become dogma, and new ideas are seen as threats rather than opportunities. People stop questioning, stop exploring. The neurons start firing in the same old repetitive patterns. The collective mind becomes less flexible, less able to adapt to new challenges, whether it's a drought or a social crisis. It's like a brain losing its plasticity. From a neuroscience perspective, this is a recipe for disaster. A healthy brain is constantly rewiring itself. When a society loses this ability, it's like a cognitive decline on a massive scale. The connections start to break down. Trade routes falter, communication becomes fractured, and social trust erodes. The once vibrant network of people begins to disconnect, neuron by neuron. The society's consciousness, its shared culture and identity, starts to fade. Eventually, the network collapses. The civilization doesn't just get conquered. It experiences a kind of systemic breakdown from within. The social brain ceases to function. The cities are abandoned not just because of external pressures, but because the internal connections that made them work are gone. So the next time you see the ruins of an ancient city, remember it's not just a pile of stones. It's a fossil of a once great mind, a powerful reminder that the greatest threat to any civilization might just be a failure to think differently. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this perspective, don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into history and the human mind. See you next time. Warnings of impending collapse, crop failures, economic strain, social unrest may have been present, but filtered through the lenses of denial, optimism bias, and diffusion of responsibility. Philosophically, this reflects the eternal tension between human consciousness and the external world. Societies, like individuals, often mistake stability for permanence. The assumption that yesterday's prosperity guarantees tomorrow's survival is deeply ingrained, yet history repeatedly demonstrates its fallacy. The empire's vanishing overnight is a stark illustration of what complexity theorists call critical transitions. Systems that appear stable can shift abruptly to entirely new states with minimal warning. This is not magical but systemic. From a psychological viewpoint, the collapse highlights collective stress responses. In moments of existential threat, humans rely on heuristics and routines that historically enhanced survival. But in the face of unprecedented challenges, these same mechanisms can backfire. Panic spreads faster than information. Rumor becomes reality. Social cohesion erodes just when it is most needed. Consider the empire as an immense neural network. Information flow is paramount. In healthy conditions, signals propagate efficiently. Misfires are corrected. Redundancies preserve function. But once key nodes, leaders, resource centers, communication hubs fail simultaneously, the network can enter a feedback loop of escalating dysfunction, leading to systemic shutdown. Archaeological evidence, though limited, supports this scenario. Excavations reveal cities abandoned suddenly, with meals uneaten, tools discarded, and personal belongings left in haste. There are no signs of prolonged sieges or violent annihilation, suggesting a non-linear, internalized collapse rather than external conquest. In neuroscience, this mirrors a sudden seizure in a highly connected cortical network, an abrupt state change that disrupts previously stable functions. Moreover, the empire's vanishing challenges our assumptions about temporal perception. Humans tend to experience time linearly, connecting cause and effect sequentially. Yet complex systems do not behave linearly. Subtle interactions accumulate unnoticed until a tipping point is reached. This explains why the empire could seem stable until the very moment it vanished, creating the illusion of overnight disappearance. The philosophical implications are equally profound. If civilizations are emergent neural networks, then their apparent permanence is illusory, contingent on innumerable variables beyond human foresight. Stability is not a guarantee. Collapse is not necessarily a failure of intelligence, but a natural property of highly interconnected systems operating near critical thresholds. We can also draw metaphorical lessons about resilience. Individual neurons and social nodes alike require adaptability, redundancy, and diversity to endure perturbations. Monocultures, whether agricultural, cultural, or organizational, may optimize for short-term efficiency but amplify vulnerability. The Lost Empire exemplifies this principle, remarkable in its achievements, yet brittle under compounded stress. Interestingly, the empire's disappearance may have served a hidden adaptive function for human systems. While tragic, the collapse likely redistributed populations, knowledge, and resources, catalyzing innovation in neighboring regions. From an evolutionary standpoint, catastrophic events act as selection pressures, prompting recalibration and reorganization. In other words, what seems like sudden loss may be an essential signal for long-term systemic survival. We must also confront the limitations of historical memory. The empire vanished not only physically but epistemologically. Records were scarce, oral histories fragmented, and the collective consciousness of neighboring societies absorbed fragments into myths. This underscores a key insight. Human systems are not only vulnerable to collapse, but to erasure. The impermanence of civilizations reminds us that survival depends not only on material or military strength but on adaptability, perception, and information flow. Another striking element is the interplay between stress and innovation. Research in neuropsychology suggests that moderate stress enhances cognitive flexibility and problem-solving, whereas extreme unrelieved stress leads to cognitive shutdown. In societal terms, the empire may have reached a stress threshold beyond which coordinated problem-solving failed. The mechanisms of collapse, environmental pressures, internal inefficiencies, cognitive biases, and social stress responses combine to produce a state shift that appears instantaneous from the outside, yet is the result of layered, interacting factors unfolding over years or decades. Archaeologists continue to puzzle over subtle traces, city foundations aligned with astronomical events, ceremonial sites indicating ritualized responses to crisis, and infrastructural adaptations suggesting attempts at resilience. These remnants reveal a civilization highly attuned to both natural and social environments, yet ultimately constrained by limits inherent in complex systems. From a neurophilosophical perspective, this lost empire is a metaphor for the fragility of consciousness itself. Just as a neural network can experience abrupt functional shifts due to interconnected vulnerabilities, so too can human societies. The sudden vanishing is a reminder that intelligence, culture, and technological advancement do not immunize against systemic fragility. The story also invites reflection on modern parallels. Contemporary global civilization operates with unprecedented interconnectivity, financial networks, supply chains, digital communications, yet faces environmental, social, and technological stressors whose interactions remain poorly understood. The lessons of the lost empire resonate today. Vigilance, redundancy, adaptability, and humility are critical for survival in the face of complex, interdependent threats. Perhaps the most thought-provoking insight is psychological. Humans are inclined to narrativize, simplify, and personalize history. The empire's disappearance challenges this tendency. It cannot be explained by single heroes, villains, or events. Instead, it demands recognition of collective cognition, emergent dynamics, and systemic limits. In that sense, history itself becomes a laboratory for understanding the human mind on a grand scale. As we reconstruct the empire's final hours, we encounter fragmented records, cryptic artifacts, and environmental proxies. Yet each fragment offers a window into decision-making under stress, communal priorities, and adaptive strategies. Observing these patterns through the combined lenses of history, neuroscience, and philosophy enriches our comprehension of what it means to organize, perceive, and act within a networked human system. And here lies the twist. What appears as weakness or failure may simultaneously represent a protective recalibration of the system. The empire's vanishing, while catastrophic locally, prevented potentially more destructive outcomes, such as widespread famine, ecological collapse, or prolonged conflict. In neural terms, sometimes the abrupt shutdown of a circuit prevents systemic overload or excitotoxicity. Thus, the sudden disappearance is not merely a story of loss, but a narrative about hidden resilience encoded in the architecture of complex systems. Ultimately, the story of this lost empire is a meditation on impermanence, adaptability, and the delicate balance between order and chaos. It challenges us to rethink stability not as permanence but as dynamic equilibrium, to recognize that collapse is often a natural consequence of complexity, and to appreciate that human perception is inherently limited in anticipating nonlinear transitions. As we reflect on this vanished civilization, we are reminded that the lessons of history are not confined to dusty ruins. They are embedded in the very fabric of human cognition, social networks, and collective behavior. The empire's sudden disappearance is a mirror, reflecting both the vulnerabilities and capacities inherent in our own societies. So what does this mean for us today? How can we, as members of an interconnected global civilization, learn from the silent echoes of a world that vanished overnight? The answer lies not in fear or nostalgia, but in observation, adaptability, and the cultivation of resilience. By understanding the interplay of stress, perception, and collective dynamics, we can design systems, both social and technological, that are robust against abrupt shocks while remaining flexible to change. The lost empire may be gone, but its lessons are profoundly alive, embedded in the structures we build, the decisions we make, and the ways we respond to uncertainty. If nothing else, it serves as a philosophical and scientific reminder that permanence is an illusion, that awareness of limits is as important as ambition, and that human systems, like neural networks, thrive not in static stability but in dynamic, adaptive equilibrium. The silent cities, the abandoned artifacts, and the vanished knowledge are not simply remnants of failure, they are signals, sent across time, urging us to observe, reflect, and prepare. They remind us that intelligence is not merely the ability to grow or create, but the capacity to anticipate, adapt, and learn from the unseen. And so, as we contemplate the lost empire that disappeared overnight, we confront profound questions. How do societies perceive and respond to slow-building crises? What structures enhance resilience and which amplify fragility? How does collective cognition shape the trajectory of civilizations? These are not just historical inquiries. They are living questions with relevance to our present and future. If you found this exploration illuminating, if it sparked curiosity or inspired reflection, take a moment to like this video, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Past Lens for more journeys into the hidden layers of history, the architecture of civilizations, and the human mind through the ages. Together, we can peer through the lens of the past to better understand the intricate networks that define our present and shape our future.